Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this webinar on My Maths Practice. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. I'm just gonna make sure everyone can hear me. If you want to pop in the chat, if you can hear me, that'd be smashing. My name is Laura Borrelli. I am a commissioning editor here at Folens, and I've had the pleasure for the last 2 years of working on this program, My Maths Practice, and I am delighted to take the time today to talk you more about it and tell you everything there is to know about the program. But before I do that, I'd like to talk you through our agenda for today. We have about 30 minutes for this webinar, and it's been structured into 4 fairly short chunks. So I'm gonna start off by introducing My Maths Practice, telling you what it is, what we set out to achieve, and the key benefits that you could get from the program. And then I'm going to go in depth and show you all of those benefits in practice and what they look like in the books themselves. We're going to then have some time for questions and answers, and I'd love to thank all of you who sent questions in advance, but if you have any throughout this evening, please pop them in the chat, and we'll get to them in this portion. And then we'll finish up with a couple of admin bits and bobs, including how you can enter our prize draw to win either a £100 voucher from Thomas Brown, not pounds, but euros, or a class set of My Maths Practice. So without further ado, what is My Maths Practice? What we set out to do was to create the workbooks you already know and love. Think of the likes of mental maths books, like daily mixed topic revisions, same number of questions every day, but injecting them with new curriculum flair. And on top of that, we also wanted to improve on the products you already are using and you already love. So we wanted to make sure our layout was as clear as possible, that our language was as accessible as possible so that pupils could use them independently. We've really focused on our structure in a way that allows us to have a very balanced coverage of all the strands and strand units. And then we've also added on some micromath style activities for early finishers in case you need to entertain some of your pupils. So what does that add up to? And what does that mean for you? It means it's an easy program to use. It's easy books for you to use because it's a format you're already familiar with, but so much better. And I will get more in depth into all of these points later on. It means it's easy for your students because it's accessible to them. It means it's easy to monitor areas of strength and weakness because of the structure being consistent. You can see which questions pupils are getting right consistently, which questions pupils are consistently not getting right, and that you need areas that you need to strengthen. We've got easy answers available either online or as printed if needed. And then we've also have early finishers sorted. So now that I've given you the bird's eye view, I'm going to start showing you what that looks in practice. So first off, we're publishing these from 1st to 6th class. And once I show you the inside, I feel like you're immediately going to be able to recognize. It's a format that I think everyone in this chat has seen at one point or another. You have your questions Monday to Thursday, same amount of questions each day. There's some problem solving at the bottom. It's all sorts of topics through the curriculum that are being covered. And then at the end of the book, you've got a review section, which is for your Friday, and it's slightly more questions, slightly more in depth. Nothing groundbreaking about it. So where does the magic come in? Firstly, we spent a lot of time thinking about the structure and making sure we had a balanced coverage. So what we've actually done is we've looked at Maths My Way and we've actually weighed how much each strand and strand unit was covered within that program and pondered what that meant for the amount of questions we wanted on each day. And that's reflected in the structure that we've then given our authors. So when they wrote the books, they knew this is the set of questions, this is what you're covering each day. Every day, for example, for first class and second class, the first question is going to be on numeration and counting. The second is going to be place value and base 10, and so on and so forth. And then for problem solving, we've endeavored to include as many topics and strand units in there. So every strand and strand unit is covered within our problem solving as well. And these are the structures for third and fourth, and for fifth and sixth. In terms of, we've also focused on new areas of learning, which we're including in a thoughtful and accessible way. I wanted to give you an example of an area where we've seen the new curriculum introducing this earlier than it would have been the usual. So for transformation, and specifically these questions are on reflection. You can see for first class, this is what we have in our books. Take the image that is a flip of A. The language is quite simple. You only have 2 options to tick and choose from. If you move on to third class, we've got the language is becoming slightly harder, but we're still retaining the easier terminology in there. Color, the reflection, flip of the first shape, but they're having to pick between 3. And then if you look at fifth class, now they are taking ownership and actively doing the reflection themselves. They don't have options, they just need to do it correctly themselves. The mirror line is being introduced. So hopefully that showcases not just how we've brought in areas of the new curriculum at the right level, but how we've thought about the progression throughout each book. We've done our best to pick questions that promote mathematical thinking, but with the kind of questions that the new curriculum likes, where they can solve problems in many different ways and they're all correct, it becomes quite hard to mark them. So we wanted to still have that high level of mathematical thinking, really rich questions, but we wanted the marking to be straightforward and there to be, only one possible answer that is correct, easy to mark, but they're still putting their thinking caps on, putting their mathematical thinking to the test. So we've got examples of this across, again, first, third, and fifth class here. We've tried to include pictorial aids and manipulatives wherever it was pertinent and relevant to the subject level and, to the year. So I've got quite a few examples from first class because it is slightly more relevant for that age range, but I also have examples for third and fifth. Here is an addition with a 5 frame next to it as a pictorial aid. We then have a subtraction with a purely pictorial aid, and then place value question with place value cubes. And this is for third class, where we're moving on to showing an abacus. And then for fifth class, we've got a data and chance question, which is showing a pictorial aid as the basis for it. We've also tried to keep our problems anchored in real life and having pertinent context that children will understand. So here's an example from first class where we're asking them to match the correct number of spades to the bucket and figure out how many more spades do we need. Here's an example from third class of a schedule and how many more minutes after something a lesson starts. And here's an example from fifth class where we're asking them to figure out the price of combined purchasing of different tickets. In terms of the layout, I'm just going to let this speak for itself a little because we've put a lot of effort into making these bright and engaging. Obviously, with first class, where you need a lot of pictorial representations, we wanted to make sure that, the artwork was very clear. It was very clear which questions the artwork was supposed to be supporting and pertained to. We've really tried to make them bright and colorful and engaging, but at the same time retaining that clarity. And then I've got an example here for third class. You see that now we've gone up 14 questions. So I'll go back for a second. First class, you have 12 questions, and then 2 of those are problem-solving questions. For third class, you have now 14 questions, 3 of which are problem-solving questions. And for fifth class, you've got 16 questions, 4 of which are problem-solving questions. So hopefully you can see the clear progression across levels. We've also put a lot of effort into making sure our language was as accessible as possible and as stripped down as possible, because obviously we do not want literacy to be an obstacle to the maths. We want pupils to be able to get to their word problems or to their problems and their maths questions and not have literacy be a stumbling block. So an example here is where normally you would have 3 sentences. Aaron has 7 blocks. Kira has 5 blocks. How many blocks do they have altogether? It now becomes 2 pictorial representations and 1 sentence, which is significantly less for children to read. And the same goes for the next couple of examples, where hopefully you can see we've tried to strip down the language without losing out on clarity. And then the thing I wanted to mention about question 11 here with fill in the blanks, we've tried to keep our rubrics as consistent as possible, particularly in the lower end. So first and second class, we've tried to really keep it quite formulaic. Fill in the blanks is a rubric that comes up very often, and that is so that children can get used to that rubric. They will know what it means. They will know what the question is asking them to do. They can then focus on the maths, and hopefully it becomes easier and easier for them to recognize when the questions are, formulated in a way that's repetitive enough. Because we've put in all sorts of strand and strand units into our problem solving, we've also been able to add in some problems that do not have any words at all in them. And that is a big source of pride for me. I particularly enjoy the algebra questions. I think they look lovely. And we've tried to keep them, fun and bright and add in elements that children can hopefully respond to positively. We also wanted to make sure that they had references handy in case they need to go back and see what something means, or need to, if we're mentioning corners for shapes, for example, what is a corner? They can go back. So the last 2 pages of the book are maths references, and those vary from book to book depending on what their program covers on that year. So I'm going to show you a few of them for, again, first, third, and fifth. And then the things that were actually more important that we felt needed to have their space and be the most easily accessible, we have put on our back cover. So that for first and second class, that's a 100 square. For third and fourth, it's the equivalent of a fraction wall. And then for fifth and sixth, it's equivalences between fractions, decimals, and percentages. And because they're on the back of the book, they can very easily refer back to them without having to, change the spot on the page or the page that they're on. Then I wanted to spend a little bit more talking about the structure, because I really do believe, as lovely and amazing the language and the layout are, and I think when you open the book, those kind of speak for themselves. The structure is where the magic of these books lies. And it's not something you will notice unless it's pointed out or unless you've worked through the books for a few weeks. So as I've mentioned before, this allows us to have a very even and balanced coverage of all strands and strand units, which is wonderful. It also gives us a very consistent structure. So what that means, firstly, for your students, this is from the same week in first class. You can see that the first question is always numeration and counting, and you can see that there's a very clear repetitiveness and reliability in what the questions are going to be doing. So you've got count on, count back, count on, count back. The rubrics are very stripped back. The verbs are very similar, and they will just know what's coming. They will know what to expect from their questions. Once they get more familiar with the book, they'll just know what's coming on each given question. It's also this, again, sorry, whilst I'm on the topic of children, this is just to showcase questions 6 and 7 are always on sets and operations. 6 is always addition, 7 is always subtraction, and you again can see the consistency in how we've formulated them and presented them on the page. But the beautiful thing that it does for you as well is you can easily monitor where children are excelling and the areas that children are struggling with, because you might eventually start seeing a pattern either within a certain pupil or within your full class, where, like, say they struggle with your question 9, which is your questions about fractions. You'd be like, oh, maybe I really need to put some effort and focus on fractions. Or if they're doing really well under question 4, that's their shape and space question, and you'll know that that area of the curriculum is an area that your class is doing really, really well. And it's going to make it really easy for you to check that as you go through it with children. The other thing we've done is we've introduced new topics at the pace of learning. So what that means is if you look at this is the Maths My Way contents page from first class, and you can see that fractions is introduced for the first time in week 15. So if you look at my maths practice first class, week 14, as I mentioned before, question 9 is your fractions question. Question 9 in week 14 is not about fractions because they will not have encountered fractions yet. It is about place value. And in every week and question prior to that, it is a question on place value. But then from week 15, Monday, it does become a question about fractions. And that is done throughout. So if you're thinking about things like operations and addition, when you're like starting to go beyond addition beyond 20, or you're starting to go like now we're doing 2-digit number plus 2-digit number, those things are introduced at the pace at which they are taught, at least in Maths My Way. And then what we've done, this is not a program that's supposed to be used exclusively for Maths My Way users. We've checked, and it's a comparative time as when other programs introduce these topics as well. So obviously, if you're variating from the order in which things are covered, things might pop up slightly earlier or slightly later, but roughly it'll be a similar time to what other programs are doing as well. And what that means is children should not be encountering questions they can't answer, which really helps with them doing these questions independently. It also helps if you want to send them out as homework. You don't have to worry about children not knowing how to answer a question. You don't have to worry about parents then having to step in, maybe trying to cover something that you haven't covered yet, making more damage than good. It's been really carefully thought through and planned, and there is a very clear progression. What this means as well is if you're looking at your first class book, for example, your week 1 will be mostly revision from senior infants. Your week 1 content will be mostly revision from senior infants. Your week 30 content will be 100% first class level content. And then everything in between is like a gradient where it progressively gets harder and harder as things are taught. But the book is really very much like at a very gentle pace, steadily progressing through the program as the weeks go on. As I mentioned, this I'm going to be very brief about. We have a bank of open-ended tasks, which are like in the style of the Ada micromaths activities. We've got 1 per week, and you can use them for early finishers. We're aiming to have these out by September, and these are just very high level, early drafts of what they look like. But this for 6th class is the equivalent of what a headline stories would be from Ada. And then this is the equivalent of the same but different for 1st class. And now we are moving on to the Q&A portion of the evening. So I do have some questions already, which I'm going to touch on, and then I think one of my colleagues might jump in if there's anything I haven't talked about yet. But one thing that's come up was, can we use this program if we're using Busy at Maths, or if we're using programs that are not Maths My Way? And as I've mentioned already, the answer is a resounding yes. It will work really well with Maths My Way, but if you're not using Maths My Way, that's not going to be able to stop you. The pace of learning is still like largely similar across programs, so it will still work in the way that it's intended. We've had a lot of questions about multigrade and if these resources are suitable for multigrade. And again, the answer there is yes, in that, I mean, they are homework. They are intended as homework or as, in-class practice. But because we've used the exact same structure across levels or across stages, so you'll have, the same questions in the same order and the same topics for 1st and 2nd class, 3rd and 4th also match, and 5th and 6th match. You could by all means use them with a multigrade classroom, and then if there's a topic that's coming up again and again as needing addressed, or if there's a question that sparks classroom discussion, or you want to use a question to start off a lesson, you absolutely can, because it's going to be fairly similar content I'm just gonna keep reading here and see if there's anything else. Is it envisioned to be used in class or as homework? Both. So we've created it because we wanted it to be used independently by children. And so you can absolutely send it out as homework. If you're used to using these resources in class at the start of your lesson, say, and then taking some of the later questions as prompts to begin your lesson, you absolutely can do that as well. But it works both ways, and really it's up to you, however you feel more comfortable in your teaching. How many questions per day and how many weeks are there in each book? So I've mentioned how many questions per day there are already, but I don't mind repeating that. We have 12 questions per day in first and second class and 15 questions on the Friday. Then we go up to 14 questions per day in third and fourth with 20 questions on the Friday, and then 16 questions per day in fifth and sixth with again 20 questions on the Friday. And that is across 30 weeks per book. So if you're thinking of Maths My Way, which has 32 weeks, we are basically not counting the first week and the last week, which are like fully revision weeks. And then the rest is following the structure of the book. Let me see if there's anything else here. How does this book differ from others on the market? I think the main thing is how it's closely aligned to the new maths curriculum and all of the thought we've put into our content and structuring it in such a thoughtful way and matching, learning progression through the year. And then you have all the effort we've put in the layout. I do think if you put them side by side with other resources on the market, you can tell the difference. I think that's most of what I had. I don't know if there's anything else from the chat that needs addressed.
No, I'm mostly putting on orders for samples here, Lara.
Amazing. Well, that's great.
Yeah, we will have our warehouse very busy tomorrow getting samples out. So I've got anyone who dropped a request into the chat, I've put on the order. I have some emails from people that I've responded to, but you will also get a link for a survey at the end, and you can request your samples there, or there's a link in the chat. So lots of ways to get your hands on it. So yeah, that's it. No other questions have come in, so unless anyone wants to drop anything into the chat there now, I think we're good.
Okay, I'm gonna move swiftly on to our wrap-up portion. There are two more reasons, if I haven't convinced you enough, why you might want to give us a try. The first one is we have a launch price, which is a special price of €9.50 per book. And that means that this is the most competitively priced mixed topic revision book on the market. And it's fully aligned with the new PMC. It's the only book currently out that is fully aligned with the new PMC. And we're also the cheapest. If that's not enough, we also have a special introductory offer where you get to choose your free gift while stock lasts on a first come, first served basis. Pick between either a free My Wellbeing Diary for every pupil in your class, and this resource includes online teacher guides, PowerPoints, mindfulness videos, as well as the journal themselves. Or you can get a class set of 10 maths posters. They're A1 size. They're actually 5, and then they're double-faced. So you've got some material on one side, some on the other. And the way we've created them, you have like easier references for like first to third-ish on one side, and then third to sixth on the other side. So you end up with 5 posters that you can use. And this is available not just if you order directly from us, but also if you go through your local bookshop. So however you normally place your order, you should be able to avail of this offer. And that leads us neatly to the end of this webinar. Here's the link to the survey. If you want to complete it, you'll be entered into a draw to win either a class set of My Maths Practice or the £100 Brown Thomas. I keep saying pounds. I'm sorry. I live in Northern Ireland. The €100 Brown Thomas voucher. But you can also use this to request demos, samples. If you want our reps to get in touch with you, if you want evaluation copies, that is the place to put in those requests. I'm going to leave this up for another few minutes. I also think one of my colleagues is going to drop that link in the chat if that's handier. And then that neatly takes us to the end of our evening. So thank you all so much for joining. Unless there have been any more questions that have appeared in the chat, I think that's us. I'm gonna...
Yeah, no questions really there, Lara. The link has just been dropped into the chat there. India's just posted it in. So that's there. And we'll send that out by email tomorrow as well. So
that's
everyone will
perfect.
get that. Yeah.
Fabulous. Well, in that case, with 5 minutes to spare, dare I say I can leave you all to your evening.
Okay.
And thank you so much to everybody who has joined us tonight, and thank you for your interest in this scheme. We're very excited to be bringing it out.